Hello and welcome to this week's Press Preview alongside Justin Conn. I'm Aren Dow. A lot of great stuff week one. You know, it's always great when you have that first week in the books and you finally see this team it has what they have, and you kind of do all this research and coming in and finally get to see it all play out. And nothing probably as big as MacArthur beating Glenwood week one. Glenwood, a team in the CS8 that is a perennial top 3, top 4 team in that conference, and MacArthur came in and beat them in overtime.
Right, and I think this week one this year was a little different. It seems like after most week ones, we're like, well, that's about what we thought would happen, and then we won't really know until week 3 or 4. And I mean, there's still a lot to learn, but I thought this was a more revealing week one than we've had in recent years. And one of the big questions was, what will the Central State 8 be like for MacArthur and Eisenhower coming out of the Big 12? And I think my feeling was it would be, pretty similar. But boy, after the first week, I'm beginning to rethink that maybe the Big 12, the top teams in the Big 12 were awfully tough for MacArthur to beat, in their history in the conference. And all of a sudden, they come out against Chatham Glenwood, and they just had a lot going for them. They really could have scored. Outside of a little run in the third quarter, they could have scored on almost every possession they had the ball, and they outplayed them. If they would have lost that game, that would have been a tough one to take, just because they really outplayed them, on both sides of the ball. And
on last week we talked about if MacArthur can get this win, that's huge. I mean, not only do you get to the playoff, getting those 5, which was kind of, I would say, a pretty good bet anyway, even if they didn't beat Glenwood. But now that they have that, that's a much easier road to get to the playoffs. And now they're putting their name in the discussion for the top 4 teams in the conference. If you're a MacArthur Eisenhower fan, coming from the Big 12, you have a conference that's had 5 different winners in the past 6 years. There's a lot of change in the top, and that's not the case for the Central State 8. And I think there's a lot of people in Decatur and MacArthur especially saying, I don't understand why everybody's doubting us. I don't understand why they think we can't come in. The way that it's gone in the Central State 8 is SHG, it's Rochester, it's Glenwood, and Jacksonville. And that's been that way for the last 4 years. And if you go beyond that, when Rochester, before they came in, there was Taylorville and Springfield were the other 2 teams. And it's always been that way. You always have your bottom teams and you always have your top teams. And the way that Glenwood lost to MacArthur, and now you have Lanphier beating Jacksonville, that is probably the craziest week the Central State 8 has had in a long time.
And I don't know that you can totally just count the conference change as the main reason for this. No. I will say that this MacArthur team did look more poised than in some past years. No bad snaps, no penalties that just killed them at the most inopportune time. And then the thing was, they had the perfect excuse in this game, because they ended up having 6, 7 kids cramp up all at once in the third quarter. I mean, they were really scrambling at this point. And I remember thinking, boy, this is rough if this is how they lose this game because of this. But at least they knew when they were on the field they had the better team. But they survived. They took a little bit of a beating in the third, and then the guys that were cramping up got back on the field, and they didn't use it. That didn't become an excuse. They came out and overcame that, and that's just not something that we've necessarily seen out of MacArthur teams in some of these past few seasons here, where they've had talented teams but just maybe didn't quite take that next step. This team looks like it, and they have the weapons with Sean Trespace is so fast, and Jaquay Owens is so talented, and then they have Shaquez Bond, who was the punter. Punts are going to be right now. Lanphier is working on how do we stop this? Because Bond will come out, take a look, and if you were selling out to on defense, he's going to punt it 50 yards over your head, and then if you get back in punt formation, he's going to run it on you or pass it, and so that's. They have a lot of weapons.
When you're talking about the maturity, you have, we're talking about Spates and Owens. I mean, the guys that are touching the ball majority of the time. I mean, these guys who have played varsity since they're freshmen, starting their sophomore year. I mean, these guys have been playing for such a long time that they've had this experience that I think that'll definitely help, keep going through. And if MacArthur stays healthy, they got a real good chance to make a real good run in Central State 8. And now they come up playing Lanphier, which, before the season started, if you would have asked most people in Central State 8, I think this MacArthur-Lanphier will be a really interesting game. People are like, no, I don't understand what you're talking about. But the fact that Lanphier beat Jacksonville, which I think is probably the more shocking game, easily, now you have MacArthur taking on a Lanphier team that is very similar to what they have. They have a quarterback in Jared Griffin who ran the ball for 265 yards on 20 carries last week, and also Reggie Dickerson ran for 120. They ran the ball. It was pretty much like MacArthur. I mean, they ran the ball the entire game. They got a fourth. It was pretty much tight the entire way, and they got a 6-point win against Jacksonville. That's huge for Lanphier. They haven't had that kind of win in a long time. And MacArthur is coming in, and they had a big win, but they'll have to match the intensity that Lanphier puts out as well.
Absolutely, and maybe the biggest surprise of the whole, if any team, Eisenhower didn't beat Rochester, but they're in the game until the third quarter. I think that. That's unbelievable. And they scored 28 points, and I know our sports editor, Mike Albright, dug up the stat. It was the first time since 2005 that Eisenhower had scored 28 points in a game, and it was against the 4-time defending state champions in Rochester. I mean, and I don't think it's a case that Rochester's down. I think Eisenhower has some weapons, and right now, Caleb Doherty to Colton Lockwood looks like a thing.
Yeah, and they took some shots and completed them. The way that be able to hang with Rochester, that's really encouraging for Eisenhower to come out with Rochester and now SHG. I thought maybe those first 2 weeks, as long as they can have a couple things that they're somewhat positive about, because those are two really tough games. I mean, those are two of the best teams in the entire state of Illinois, and I think from this game, even if it's going to be a really tough run here in the first several weeks, but you have to be encouraged by what you saw. I mean, that was they have a lot of options at running back, and if they can get that passing game where they can make a couple shots, Eisenhower can. I think you look at the bottom of that CS8, they can. I know we talked about 3 wins. I think that's pretty reasonable right now to get 3 wins. I think that's maybe the expectation, 3-4 wins after a couple of seasons where you've only won a game.
I mean, I know that there are people who thought that if Eisenhower got 5 or 6 first downs in this game, that's success, and they just went so much beyond that.
I think a lot of it is, you thought that the potential was there, but with so many young players, a lot of sophomores on that team, for them to come in that first week and say, okay, we're ready to play week 1. I mean, you kind of expected this maturity maybe week 6, week 7, but week 1 against Rochester, that's incredible.
Do you feel like this? We can already decide, hey, they're going to be more competitive. These two teams are going to be more competitive in the Central State 8 than they were in the Big 12.
Definitely Eisenhower. I always think definitely Eisenhower and MacArthur. The thing last year they had a lot of close games. I mean, you look at that Danville game that they just kind of collapsed, and it was just like, man, they had that in the bag after that first half. We'll see how they play Rochester and SHG. Can they crack that top 2 for MacArthur? There was a lot of kind of, how is it going to be kind of entering the CSA? Is it worth making the move? You have to be happy after week 1 if you're MacArthur or Eisenhower.
No question about it. Another team that really surprised me in week 1 was Mount Zion.
Yeah.
I thought they would be more competitive with Mahomet this year. I still thought Mahomet would beat them. Last year, that really wasn't a game. I mean, Mahomet dominated them, and for them to now have scored 60 points, and it was a flurry in the third quarter that I think the rest of the Apollo and the teams on Mount Zion's schedule have to say, uh-oh,
yeah,
what is this?
I mean, Mahomet was a team that was ranked in the AP poll at 8th. I mean, they had 9 wins last season, I believe. This is a good team. I mean, they had their quarterback coming back. They had his brother at wide receiver. They had a really good combination, and Mount Zion still came in, and you knew that the Peyton Grindstaff had kind of proven it, and Mason Bruce had a really good last year, but you look at Brandon Price had 7 catches and a couple touchdowns. Tyler Hayes came in his first game at 133 yards in his first game, and that defense to hold Mahomet to 36 points, that's really impressive. Yeah. You're going to get shots from Mahomet, and the pace that they play, you're going to give them opportunities, and only hold them to 36 points. I think that's encouraging.
Well, yeah, and it's funny because I think I wrote before the season, if they keep giving up 35 points a game, they're not going to, they're not going to win enough games. But if you're scoring 60, you're just going to give up more points when you're scoring that many points. It's just, you look at Greenville, another team that has a lot of possessions and scores fast. Their defensive numbers never look great, but they're playing defense. It's just when the other team has the ball that often, you're going to give up points. It's just the way. That's just the way it is. So I think I don't think that's. I wouldn't be worried about that if I'm Mount Zion. I would be like 60. If we keep doing that, we're gonna win a lot of games.
Also, if you haven't picked up Mason Bruce in your prep fantasy league, you probably should start now. I talked to Popovich before the season. He's like, I think he gave me a number, and he didn't want to say exactly what it was, but he said where it was at was above the highest reception total we had for anybody last year. And I don't think that's I don't think that's unreasonable anymore to think that he could easily be the number one and to have over 1,000 yards. I mean, that week one, how many touchdowns he had? 3 or 4, I think. I mean, 10 catches, and yeah. Mason Bruce is going to be a really nice talent for Mount Zion this year.
I think before the season started, we talked a lot about not knowing what was going to happen in the LOVC Northwest, and just kind of being like, I don't really know how this is going to play out. And week one was crazy, and the team that I thought kind of came out looking best was Argenta Oriana.
Easily, yeah.
And they beat an Oblong team that we both liked a lot before the season. They beat them pretty good. And Keegan McHood, we were like, are they going to use him to pass more? What are they going to do with him? Well, the rest of the LOVC is going to see a lot of one big boy coming at them. If they keep going 25, 28 carries a game with Keegan McHood, that's bringing a lot of pain.
Yeah, I know I would want to tackle him. I mean, and you think, okay, baseball arm, maybe they'll throw a little bit, but if he can run, why not just run? And they have a couple different, options at running back that if they need to give him a breather, they can. I know we were both high on Oblong. I kind of thought that offense was going to be something special, and I think it still will be. But for Argenta to hold them under 10 points. That's a pretty good defensive effort from Argenta. I mean,
Absolutely.
Keegan McHood was great on offense, but I think defensively, Argenta looked pretty good to hold Oblong to only a handful of points.
So you have them, and then the only other team, you had Arcola beat Martinsville, which was pretty much expected. Sangamon Valley played pretty well and beat Palestine Hudsonville. And then you had the two teams that we liked the best in the conference, Arthur Lovington Atwood Hammond and Sarah Gorda Bement, both get beat, and Arthur really got beat pretty bad by Villa Grove, which I thought was a pretty big surprise.
Yeah, I mean, Sarah Gordo, they're coming off of, they lose a lot of pieces. It's not even Steve Isbell. I mean, I think defensively with, Jay Woods and D Woods gone, it might have taken a little bit of time. And in Tri-County, they're not a bad team. But I was a little surprised with Arthur. And, who knows? I mean, Villa Grove has been just as strong as any other team in that area for a while. And I just, 20 points, okay, but I did not expect Arthur to only score 6 points. And maybe, things will start to come together. I know they have a lot of new pieces on at running back and wide receiver. And maybe that'll come, but I was a little surprised to see Arthur. And, who knows? I mean, the little Oka Northwest division, that should be a pretty exciting conference to watch, or division to watch.
Definitely. And then when you look at next week with, now Oblong will play Sangamon Valley.
Right.
We'll kind of see. That's the conference we're still really kind of trying to figure out the pecking order in. So we'll start finding more things out with that game. Cerro Gordo, I'm not going to get too worried about them yet because we've seen them, have rough starts before. Not the last couple of seasons, obviously, but we've seen them have rough starts before. Andy Curley will kind of try to find that, combination that works, and he will, keep looking for, a more explosive offensive combination, and so I think you have to kind of always watch that team because they have a lot of good pieces on the line and in their secondary as well. So who knows what's going to happen in that conference? So I really do think we didn't know, and I still really have no clue.
Yeah, and Argenta, a big win week one, but they do have 2 tough games in Villa Grove and then St. Thomas More, 2 and 3. If they can get a couple or a win at least one out of those 2, I think that's a success. I mean, kind of coming out, that's a pretty tough schedule for the next 2 weeks. So we'll see how that plays out.
We wanted to hit a couple real quick things about the start of the season as well. You mentioned having a high school fantasy football team. I want Isaac Elkins from KZ Westfield.
Okay.
His first game as the official starter. I know he played one game last year when Nico Stepina was suspended, but Elkins went 5 of 7, 135 yards, and a couple touchdowns, and didn't necessarily play the whole game. So, I think now that they have that passing attack to go along with some of the runners they have, really think that this is going to be a big year for Casey, which isn't going out too far on a limb, but still, I really like that team right now.
And Mount Zion, the other big team in the Apollo, Taylorville. Tanner Champley had 252 yards total. And I think passing, he hit several different options for touchdowns. I think 4 different touchdowns through the air. So I think Taylorville looked really good week 1. They had a lot of diversity on their offense, and I think that was something that they were really hoping Champley would come in with a little consistency, and he definitely had it week 1 against Mount Vernon, which was a really good team last year and still had a lot of pieces back. So Taylorville was a really strong opening week 1.
We've already talked about some of the games going on next week. Another one we wanted to fit in real quick was Tuscola against Georgetown Ridge Farm. I know Ridge Farm beat Warrensburg. Took them a little while to get going in that game, but they did win pretty handily. Tuscola was very impressive in their first game against Westville. So, this will be an interesting game as far as kind of knowing maybe where some of the CIC teams stack up.
Yeah, I kind of saw Ridge Farm as a small step up from Westville, maybe a little bit more than that. But if Tuscola beat Westville the way they did, I would think that they'd be favored to definitely beat to Georgetown. They got the home field advantage too. So to come out with 2 strong wins, before they start the CIC, that conference schedule, that's good. Nick Bates looked, he picked up right where he left off his sophomore year. So, Tuscola looks very strong week 1.
Pick'em was a little rough on me in the first week. I don't know how you did, but
I had more than you.
But I struggled a little bit. But you can still, if you haven't already got on Pick'em, you still have time to get on there.
And you do lose 1 week. So if you don't want to use your week 1, if you didn't sign up, go ahead. You won't miss a beat week 2.
Exactly right. Also, check us out on Facebook and Twitter. And, of course, we'll be out at the games next week. We'll see you out there.